Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Terri Cole Show. I am so happy that you are here. So let me start this episode with a question. Do you ever find yourself in a relationship with someone who is calling you names when they get mad, who will throw things when they get mad, who will mock you or make fun of you when you're fighting? Anybody? I know some of you because somebody wrote this into me and asked me to do an episode on emotional abuse, how to identify it and what to do if you're experiencing it. And that's exactly what I'm covering in this episode. So if you're new to my channel, welcome. Please introduce yourself below in the comments. I would love to know you, to see about you. Make sure that you're subscribed. So just hit the bell so that you don't miss a thing. When anything new comes out, you get it. If you don't know me, if you're new, my name is Terri Cole. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, a relationship expert, and I'm the author of a book called Boundary Boss, which you can get at boundarybossbook.com. And I want to say thank you so much for all of your comments, because I read them all, and I'm going to highlight one from Chelsea Connors. Right now, she's a certified coach and former therapist, and this is about the social media and tech and boundaries episode, which was a couple of episodes ago. Love this video. So important to be reflecting on how and where we spend our time and energy. You share this in such a powerful and approachable way. So, yay. Thank you so much, Chelsea. I'm so glad you got value out of it. Remember, if you have not subscribed, please do so you don't miss a thing. Now let's move on into our episode. Moving into the first step is you have to be able to identify, what is emotional abuse? What is emotional manipulation? Because they fall into the same category. And I've also, of course, as always, I've created a little downloaded guide for you to be able to make it simple so you can just watch and be here now with me, which I appreciate that. So, there's a lot of things that go into emotional abuse, but ridiculing someone in front of other people, someone who teases you constantly or criticizes you constantly, focusing on your defects, quote unquote, like looking for your weaknesses and bringing them up to make you feel a certain way about them, using affection to reward or punish, meaning they'll be nice to you when you're doing what they want and then they will take that away. Never wanting to socialize with the people who are important to you and not wanting you to socialize with the people who are important to you. Being intimidating, like using physical aggression, even if they're not being violent, but using physical aggression to control you, or scary facial expressions, like giving you that death stare, not recognizing your good qualities or your achievements, always sort of undercutting your achievements, being insulting, right? Just straight up insulting, manipulating you through threats, or stonewalling, which is like using silence. So there's a whole bunch of other ways that people will manipulate us emotionally, but I've already done an episode on that. This is about straight up abuse. Someone mocking you, someone using something that you've told them in confidence, something that's important to you, and in a fit of anger later, or to control you, they bring that up, make fun of you, mock you. And then, of course, the regular screaming, name-calling, harsh judgments. Okay, so it's all of these things are scary. Someone being threatening is scary. Someone not talking to you can be scary too, because if they're using it to control you, to punish, right? Someone who is looking to punish. These are all abusive. They are psychologically, emotionally abusive behaviors, because what is the definition of abuse? It is literally someone trying to control you. It is using, it's using the way that you feel about them against you, basically. And of course, there's physical abuse as well, but this person who wrote in and asked me to do this episode, they were trying to understand what is emotional abuse, doubting their own experience. And verbal abuse, of course, is a part of emotional abuse. So the first thing I want you to think about is, have you seen this before, right? Have you seen this in your life? Have you seen this in your family? So I'm giving you a couple of questions that you can answer in the downloadable guide that you can just download, make it super easy to see, why is this familiar to you? Because what I find is that a lot of the times, from a psychological perspective, if you haven't had this experience, it doesn't mean that you wouldn't fall victim to it. It does not mean that. But you're less likely to fall victim to it because it would be out of the norm of your experience. It would be jarring and startling if you have not had this experience. So if there's something normal about it to you, like you've seen it before, whether you like it or not, that would be something. So you're going to answer the questions in the downloadable guide, because what we're really talking about is, how do we create emotional safety? And in an emotionally abusive relationship, there is no emotional safety, because you may feel safe in one moment, but if that moment then passes and you feel unsafe again, like there's no real trust that can be built in an emotionally abusive relationship. And listen, I'm not saying that behavior can't change. This is where boundaries come in. And again, I want you to be very clear about what kind of a relationship you're in. If you're in any kind of a dangerous situation, if this person is physically violent, has been, you believe that if you draw a boundary, they will become physically violent, you need a safe exit strategy. You need a safety plan. You don't need to be trying to establish boundaries in a relationship that is really dangerous. So again, some people are emotionally abusive because it's what they've seen, but it doesn't mean that it will escalate. But only you know the relationship that you're in. So, because there are some relationships where if you start drawing boundaries, even if your person doesn't like it in the beginning, if you stay consistent, a lot of times I've helped many couples shift this dynamic because the person who was doing it didn't realize it was emotional abuse. This is what they learned in their family of origin. They're like, oh, I thought this is how adults fought. Literally, I had one guy say that. I thought this is what adult fighting is. You just fight to win, but then, you forget about it later. But that person's wife was like, but I don't forget about it later. Like, I can't stop thinking about it. And it's really impacting how I feel about you. And they were able to really create a much more safe and sacred union between them by coming up with rules of engagement, right? So understanding fair fighting. So I'm going to give you a fair fighting list in the downloadable guide as well. But once you start to see your own history, your own, like what's in the basement of your mind, right? Your unconscious mind, where you saw this, that makes what you're experiencing a lot of times make more sense. And listen, you may not have had any history of this, and you may still be in an emotionally abusive relationship. But let's talk about, what can we do? How can appropriate and healthy boundaries help? So once you identify the things, name calling, stonewalling, all the things we already talked about, when it happens, you have to be really consistent. So there's going to be a 2-step option that you're going to consider, where the first one is you are communicating clearly and calmly without any emotions that you are requesting that that person stop that behavior. Stop calling me names, right? That is what is happening in that. And then you are to remove yourself from the situation. Again, with the caveat, with the please note, with the only you know your relationship, that if you're in a relationship with someone who is violent and leaving the room will provoke them to be violent, this is not for you. This is for people who are in emotionally relationships that can veer towards emotional abuse. You have to be consistent, though, with removing yourself from the situation. So leave the room, take space, go out for a walk, get in the car, go for a ride, because this is the consequence for that behavior, which means that if you continue to call me names, you will not have the privilege of talking to me in this moment, right? We are removing ourselves from a situation that is abusive. We have to name it. So the two parts, the two steps that we're taking, you'll do the other stuff first, because I want you to understand your own blueprint around this type of emotional boundary crossing. So that's the beginning. Understanding what emotional abuse is. Yes, understanding, fair fighting, that's in there as a reference for you. But this is your action step, which is to clearly and calmly communicate your request that they stop the action, whatever it may be. Stop mocking me. Stop using what I've told you in confidence against me. Right? It's as simple. We keep it as simple as possible. We don't have to convince. We're saying it. Stop calling me names. That's what we're calling it. And then do your best to remove yourself. If the person will not stop. If they stop, you don't have to remove yourself, but they have to stay stopped. Meaning, if it happens again, you do the same thing and say, I'm not talking to you while you engage in this abusive behavior. I'm not. Remove yourself from this situation. A lot of times we just haven't said anything. Right? We get upset. Maybe we'll cry about it. Maybe we'll, the person knows and then they try to make it up to you. But we're really talking about how healthy boundaries and consistency can shift you from this repeating boundary disaster and move you into empowered emotional boundaries. Because it is your job, your right, to create emotional safety for yourself. And you must do it within your relationships. It doesn't mean we are controlling the other person, but we are being very clear about what the directive is. So steps 1 and 2, which is communicate clearly and calmly, stop this behavior. And if they don't, remove yourself, right? And you can even take a break after if someone called you a name and you don't like it, or mocked you and thought it was funny, you can say, stop mocking me, and then remove yourself. Because again, there's got to be some action that separates. If life just goes on as usual, even if you say stop doing that, what is the payment for that? So meaning, what is the cost to the other person? You can't just be in your normal life doing your normal stuff. If the person doesn't stop, there's got to be some kind of a consequence where you don't act like life is, going on as usual. So the consistency of that. And I can tell you, I have seen in relationships that veered towards unfair fighting, dirty fighting. And again, that doesn't mean, because that happens, that the relationship is unstable or unhealthy all the time. This is an aspect of a relationship. The couple that the client couple that I was talking about, they didn't fight hardly at all. But when they did, this happened. And so that was actually a problem. But it wasn't like it was happening every day of the week. But that doesn't minimize the problem. And it also doesn't change the fact that it still needed to be handled. Because when it did happen, it would break the trust that they would build. And that's exactly what happens in emotionally abusive relationships. So if you're interested more in emotional manipulation, you can look. I'll actually, in the show notes, I will give you the information for the emotional manipulation, how to use boundaries with those people. But emotional abuse is something that is pretty specific. And I think that it's more common than people like to think about, because we love to put, relationships in categories of like abuse, like extreme abuse, and then like no abuse. And that's really not the way it is. There's gradations of behaviors, and it's up to you to be the boundary boss in your own relationship and in your own life. You dictate what's okay with you. You do not have to tolerate emotionally abusive or any kind of abusive situations. And again, if you are in a volatile and violent situation, there will be resources for you. Do not show your hand. Do not confront a violent person, please, because it is actually puts you in harm's way. So I'd love to know what you think about this. Please download the guide, because that's where all the information that you need is. I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts? Was it helpful? Was it not? Do you have your own ways that you have come about shifting your relationship from these emotionally abusive experiences into something better? I would love to hear about your experience. If you like this episode, please share it in your world. Like it, rate it, review us, do all the things that people do when somebody has a podcast and a YouTube channel show. Please, I super appreciate your support. And as always, take care of you.